So in my last post, I mentioned I was going to show you some different ways that I've used Studio Code for some qualitative research with a more grounded theory approach. Right now, this is just that code window that's pretty empty. That is, I have my research question here and just one single code for a behavioral prompt. And I'm going to show you how you can go in after coding a video for a basic behavior, like a behavioral prompt that the teacher gives, how you can go back in and add some text labels later. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my timeline, and you don't actually need your code window for this. You will develop your code window kind of as you go based on the labels you start putting in there. So if you're not aware of this already, each one of these are called instances, and when you double click on one, Studio Code will play you just that single instance.
Ready? Say
So that was one specific behavioral prompt that I had coded. So I already started adding some labels, but I wanted to show you kind of how you do that. So actually, let me X out of this so you can see. If you want to add some text labels, right now you see I already have some. You'll know if you have some because in this yellow bar here, you'll be able to see it. Actually, I'll get rid of this little video clip. So if you look at ones towards the end, it just says behavioral prompt number, that one's number 19. So there are no text labels right now inside of that. But in this first one, you can see that there are some text labels that I've added. If you want to add text labels and they're not in your code window, if you hit Command E, that opens up the Edit Labels. And you can add whatever text labels you want after you watch it by clicking this button here, this icon here. So when you click that icon, you can label whatever you want and then click Done, and it adds it with a little green tag over here. So for this particular video that this little tiny instance that I just showed you, these are some of the labels that I had added. When you're making labels, I suggest that you be very succinct but specific. So I know I'm looking for specific behaviors that the teacher's doing and specific behaviors that the student's doing, and I know I'm looking for information maybe about the prompt itself that the teacher's giving. So my first code that I gave was verbal prompt because the teacher had asked the student to make a sound. Then I had also put physical prompt because the prompt was also involved the student moving his fists. So these are my tags right now about the type of prompt that it was, a verbal and a physical. I also tagged it as incorrect response because the student did not do the behavior the teacher was requesting. And then I tagged it as teacher repeats behavior. And notice I put the word teacher here so I know that it's a teacher behavior. And the teacher basically in this video clip, I'm not going to play it again, but the teacher just repeats the exact prompt, the physical and verbal prompt that she wanted the student to do. And what I also tagged here was by the student had made a verbal response to the teacher. It just wasn't the correct one. So I have incorrect response, and the word response to me indicates it was the student. And then I also put down verbal response. So it's not like the student didn't do anything. He just gave some kind of verbal response that was not correct. So I've also coded the second instance, and I found some similar things. It was a physical prompt, but this time it was not a verbal prompt also. So the teacher appeared to have moved. If the student wasn't able to do both physical and verbal at the same time, the teacher moved to just a physical prompt. The student again had a verbal response, and then I got more specific this time. It wasn't just a regular verbal response, it was laughter. I had a specific name for what the student did. Last time he kind of just made a sound. The teacher did repeat the behavior, and then also in the second instance, the teacher prompts a similar behavior to the first one. So in this one, she actually asked the student to first like kind of tap his fingers on the table, and then when he didn't do that, she tried maybe hitting his whole hands on the table. So it was a similar behavior. But you can see how I'm kind of keeping my labels pretty simple, pretty short, and I'm trying to use the same ones in the first instance from the second one, so that I'm calling it a verbal prompt in the first one, or I'm sorry, I have verbal and physical. And over here, I have another physical prompt, and I'm using the exact same phrase. The reason for this is because when you look at your matrix, what this gives you is your codes on the side and your text labels across the top. And it should, if you put the same text label in there and you write them exactly the same, it's going to combine them all together. So verbal response, you can see there's a verbal response in instant 1 and instant 2, but it kind of put them together under the same label. It recognized that I typed the exact same thing. So really what this is going to do is it's going to tell me which ones of these behaviors that I added as labels are most common. And what I'm thinking about is that the ones that are most common might actually turn into codes later on when I'm building my code window. But right now it's just giving me an idea of what kinds of behaviors I'm seeing. So before my next post, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of these and add text labels inside all of them, and then we'll take a look at the matrix to kind of see where we are at that point.